Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Here is a new section, a big section, a very important section, and important also because it's very much related to many of the important things going on in the world today, the Middle East. So if you look at a world map today, or you look up on a list for countries of the Middle East, you sometimes end up with a contradictory list, and that depends on if it's looking at the Middle East from a political perspective, or economic perspective, or a cultural perspective. So some of the countries that I consider in the Middle East may in some lists not be there. Predominantly for me, thinking of ancient history, the most two important countries are Iran and Iraq, which we call the cradle of civilization. Of course, the unifying thing that holds many of the countries in the Middle East today is the reality of the Islamic religion, which has spread Arabic as predominant language, and a written script, of course, being Arabic. So some of the countries that may come to mind would be Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Kuwait, Lebanon, Syria. Egypt is in North Africa, but it is often in the list of Middle East. Of course, Turkey, some people would say, is not necessarily Middle East. But I'm clumping all these countries together as a Middle Eastern phenomenon because they're related to a similar culture, language, and religion. So we can go from Turkey, we can go all the way actually to, of course, many people would not consider Afghanistan as Middle East, but it's definitely very much connected. So please look at a list. I will be sending you some notes with some of the names of these countries. A very important aspect of all these countries of the Middle East is the diversity of music and the diversities of interpretation and understanding of the religion of Islam. Now, we can't really carry on much with the music and culture of the Middle East without really understanding some basic fundamentals about the Islamic religion. It is not a very ancient religion. It's just a little bit younger than Christianity. So Christianity and Islam we often think are very ancient. Actually, in the whole picture of world civilization, they are not that ancient. 2,000 years is not that long in world history. So I'm going to be starting off with some sound bites that I'd like you to listen to. I'm going to take a few minutes to set up here. You'll hear some similarities. Now you may be wondering, with all these different religions, what has this got to do with music? Well, if you think about it, one of the earliest religions would be Judaism, which is pre-Christian. Of course, Jesus Christ himself was from a Jewish community. And they, of course, used music in their worship, and music plays a very important part in Jewish culture. And a lot of great musicians have come out of the Jewish community, even today. Many of the people leading our music industry today are from a Jewish background. So music is always revered and respected. There's no contradiction between music and the use of music in worship and for entertainment. However, in Islam, it's a little bit of a tricky field because actually a lot of fundamentalists, like the people in the Taliban and in ISIS, insist that music is a sin. I don't know where they get that from because there's nothing in the Quran specifically that decries music or says that music is not allowed. But anyway, I've spoken to a number of friends that are from Islamic communities. Many of them love music. I've met many great musicians that are from a Muslim background. My music teacher in India, actually, his guru, his teacher was actually a Muslim. And even today in India, many of the great sitarists and great classical musicians are Muslims. So this idea that music is not allowed, I find this kind of absurd. Could you imagine a world without music? Can you imagine putting your radio on and there's only talking and no mention about music? For me, that would be a rather depressing, sad day when music becomes considered as something sinful. So something that I'm focusing on for this section in Middle Eastern music is a group of people called the Sufis, Sufis. I cannot um, sort of really show the importance of this community in the whole of the Middle East. As far as I'm concerned, and many scholars may argue with me, I think that if it wasn't for the Sufis, so much culture, music, and beauty that came out of Islamic culture would not exist if it wasn't for the Sufis. As far as beautiful architecture, calligraphy, poetry, different styles of music, so many of these things came out of the Sufi mindset. So that's going to be your main assignment for this section on the Middle East. Also to mention that because we are probably not going to be doing a final exam and I'm not going to be doing any more testing, your grades will be relying heavily on these assignments that you send in to me. So I'm going to be sending you a link below and also through email of a few videos you should watch. One of the most important ones is a whole documentary about Sufism, and it starts actually in India, into Pakistan, and goes all the way to, finishes off in Morocco. So of course, remember, Morocco is North Africa. It's not right smack bang in the middle of the Middle East. But of course, Morocco is a very unique Islamic country, and Sufism is very much accepted there, as is music. So the documentary starts off in North India, goes all the way through the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and then finishes off in Morocco with a huge festival that happens now every year. And you'll be doing writing a paper for me, an assignment related to this documentary on the Sufis. So I'd like to also mention about the historicness, the ancient civilization that we now know as Iran and Iraq. Prior to the advent of Islam, it was called Persia, and many Iranian people today actually, even though they may be Muslim or Christian or Zoroastrian, still revere and identify themselves with this very ancient, incredible culture, Persian culture. So many people think, oh, but this is Islamic culture. Yes, today, presently, it's Islamic. But prior to Islam, it was an extremely rich culture, music, the arts, cuisine, and I can't underemphasize the importance of this culture even in present-day Iran today. Many young people like yourselves actually are quite fed up with fundamentalist Islam and the imposing of theocracy on their country. Many people are feeling it's suppressing freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So a lot of people are losing faith and losing trust in organized religion. And some people are even turning to the religion that actually was in Iran before Islam came to be in Iran. And that is the Zoroastrian religion. Now, when Zoroastrianism was suppressed, they call themselves Parsis. Many of them actually fled to India, and there's a thriving Parsi community in India. So this is a very ancient religious tradition, Zoroastrianism. So also don't forget the fact that the Middle East is the home of Christianity and Judaism. So throughout the Middle East, there are also many Orthodox, Syrian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, different communities that are related to the earliest known Christian church that we know today. And of course, music plays a very, very important role in this. I grew up in a Greek Orthodox community, and I'll be sending you some links on YouTube that you need to watch. I'd love you to listen to a little bit of chanting that is done in the Christian monasteries, even today. The capital of Christianity, as many of you may know, was originally in a place called Constantinople in Turkey. And that is present-day Istanbul. And what is important for me here is the beautiful building called the Hagia Sophia. And I'll be sending you a YouTube video of the Hagia Sophia with somebody chanting in the Greek Orthodox style in this beautiful, incredible building. Before I carry on getting into the music, for those of you that are history buffs and are interested in ancient history, I'd like to tell you about an incredible archaeological find that a lot of research is going on in southern Turkey. You've all heard of Stonehenge, and this building site, it's an ancient temple that is considered, and they know for a fact now that it's much older actually than Stonehenge. Dates back possibly 11,000 years. And it is quite refined in its structure and its sculpture on the stonework. I'll show you a little picture. This is a great article that was in the National Geographic. You can go online if you're interested. It's a place called Göbekli Tepe. And take a look at some of that carving and some of those stones. So this is dating back 11,000 years, possibly 12, 13,000 years, some people believe. So we know for a fact that that people were not really living in big cities at that time. So this is really throwing a lot of historical concepts out the window. It's like, how could these people build this thing? And 12,000 years ago. Another important find was that we know that they had music and a rich culture was in Mesopotamia, between the rivers of, if you grew up with any Bible stories, the ancient rivers of Tigris and Euphrates are considered to be the cradle of civilization. And in those areas we have found pictures and images depicting the use of instruments and harps. And I need to find my book that I just had a minute ago. I don't know where it went. Okay, maybe I'll find it later on. But so let's dive into a little bit of music and sound. If you have ever been to an Islamic mosque or traveled anywhere in the Middle East or traveled anywhere in the world, you can actually go down to Washington or Baltimore or Philadelphia. There are mosques. And what is unique and distinct about Islam is its call to prayer and the way that the Quran is recited and chanted. For those people that are fundamentalists and say no to music, I think that is ridiculous, because some of the ways of chanting the Quran is, in my ears, nothing but music. It's like saying that birds singing, it's not sweet, it's not beautiful. For me, birds singing or animals making a noise is also music. So where is the thin line between what is music and not music? So let me see if I can find my connection here. Okay, music. Okay, give me a moment to set up my sound here so you can hear this. Oh, it's not going to sound because I don't have my speaker plugged in, sorry. Excuse me. Okay, so this is the call to prayer. Please take a solid listen to it. Listen to the cadence of the voice, the breathing, the sounds of silence in between, while I go out and look for two books I want to show. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة. This is the Kaaba, Mecca. حي على الفلاح حي على calligraphy of the Quran. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. So what you just heard is the call to prayer, which is done 5 times a day in all Islamic countries. Even in places like France today, where there's a predominance, or in England for that matter, where there's a predominance of a Muslim community, they very often would have the call to prayer out in the open, reminding people to come to pray. No matter how busy people are during the day, whether it's in the middle of a business meeting or in the middle of school, in more stricter societies, everything would stop. People would stop for a moment and go and bathe themselves with a thing called wudu, which they wash their hands, their faces, their ears, up to their elbows and their feet before entering a space of prayer. They maybe put a prayer mat out. You do not have to pray in a mosque. You can pray in the classroom or pray out in a park or out in the open. Originally, there weren't huge, big buildings, and this is a later phenomenon that they built these huge buildings called mosques today. But originally, the idea of just opening up a small space anywhere in your garden or in your house, making a place to pray. So what actually was he chanting there? It was basically, I don't want to spend too much time on religion, but I think we're talking about the Middle East, and I think for your generation, it is pretty important that you do understand some basic things about the Islamic tradition and what is the similarities and differences between Islam and Christianity. So one, people often make the mistake and think that in Islam they worship Muhammad. That is the first biggest mistake. They revere Muhammad and Christ in the same way, as well as actually Mary, the mother of Christ. She's the most often mentioned female in the Quran. So the idea is that you do not worship God in the form of a man. So they see people like Muhammad, Moses, Abraham, Christ, all as prophets and teachers, not as gods. In Christianity, we jump over that by making this whole concept of the Trinity, which is very arguable, and even the high echelons of Christianity have been debating and arguing the true meaning of this. What do we mean by the Trinity? I don't want to get into that because the Vatican have spent hundreds of years debating and arguing about it. The split between Catholicism, Protestantism, and Greek Orthodoxy, all based around this debate and argument about the meaning of the Trinity, and it's a personal decision on how you perceive that. But anyway, in Islam there is absolutely no depiction of God. The idea of painting a picture of Christ or making a statue of Christ is unacceptable. The concept of God is one is not necessarily that God is some type of a man up in the sky somewhere. So where do we go from here? Okay, musically, for me, the sound of Islam is a very natural sound, and the way that they pray in Islam is a very universal set of movements. It's called namaz. Okay. Here's what I wanted to cover. The most important things to understand is the 5 pillars of Islam. If you know these 5 pillars, you have a very good grounding and understanding of Islam. In Christianity, you can put Christian theology in a nutshell. If you ask any devoted Christian, what does it mean to be a Christian? We basically say that Christ died on the cross for your sins, and by giving your life to Christ and worshiping Christ, you're a Christian. In Islam, you can put it in a nutshell as well by saying La ilaha illallah, which is a very simple phrase, and it basically means that there is no God but God, and Muhammadur Rasulullah, that Muhammad is the prophet and messenger of God. If you say that, you basically are a Muslim. However, but then you're supposed to pray 5 times a day. So the first pillar is the fact that there is no God but God. Second pillar, just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So the first one again is no God but God, and Muhammad is the prophet of God. Second one, you need to be praying 5 times a day. Next one is during the time of Ramadan, which is a month-long fast. You're supposed to fast from sunrise to sunset. The next one is to give a certain percentage of your income to the poor. And then thirdly, most importantly, is also the pilgrimage to Mecca. If you can afford to do it in your lifetime, you should try to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, why is this emphasis on Mecca? Some people say, oh, well, they're worshipping this big stone in the middle of Mecca, which is no different to what Hindus do, no different to what Christians do when they worship in a church with an image of Christ. The fact is that the Kaaba, this block, it's not a very attractive building, really. It's actually covered and draped in a beautiful cloth with hand embroidery, as I had shown you earlier on. But the actual building itself is just a stone block building in the middle of the desert. They've built some beautiful architectural things around it to be able to control the millions of people that are going there. But the building itself, I wouldn't say, is the most attractive thing, and they're not actually worshipping the building. The idea is that it's a central place for people to be focused anywhere on this planet. Wherever they pray, they face Mecca as showing reverence and respect, but not worshipping the stone building. But that's arguable as to why people are focusing so much just on one building. Anyway, for me, the beauty of Islam is in the sound of the prayers and the universality of the movements. prostrating and putting your forehead on the ground and coming back and forth is a universal movement that is used in pretty much every religious tradition. So enough about Islam. Let's jump into the music. I mentioned a very ancient find, a thing called the Seal of Ur. And in it we have some ancient depictions. It's almost like, if you've ever heard of the Rosetta Stone, the Rosetta Stone was what was used in order to decipher hieroglyphics, because on the stone there was ancient Greek, and from that they were able to figure out how to read hieroglyphics. So something just as ancient, a thing called the Seal of Ur, which was found in the city of Ur. It was almost like a pictorial dictionary of what was going on in the society at the time. There's descriptions of trade, but inside it also, interestingly, was the depiction of instruments, the harp. And this is very similar to the depictions of the harps that were found in Egypt, not only in hieroglyphics, but actually remnants of harps. You may be wondering, but they didn't have steel strings back then, so how did they have stringed instruments? Well, they used gut strings, the same as was used in early stringed instruments, gut strings. Now, of course, since the last couple of hundred years, they've got metal strings as well, and that's what we often use on guitars and that. And but violins, some traditional violinists still use gut strings, even nylon string guitars. Now we have nylon, so people use that on their guitars. So as far as music goes, a country I have not mentioned that's very important in the section in the Middle East, although it is not considered Middle East because it is a Greek Orthodox country, is Greece. Now, where does Greece show in the picture? Don't forget that in historic times, this whole area of Turkey and Greece was called the Byzantine Empire. It's only much later on that it became the Ottoman Empire. Again, I don't want to get into too much history there that you don't need to know, but the music of Greece and the music of Turkey, there are many similarities. If you're studying Western classical music today, you would learn about the scales that are used, and the names of those scales are coming from the country of Greece. It's different areas of Greece. So the Phrygian scale, or Aeolian, or Lydian, or Mixolydian scales. I will have this in your notes. I would like you to be aware of the fact that the names of the scales that are used today are coming from Greece. And many other theories of music. Of course, you can't underestimate the teachings of people like Pythagoras, who apparently, very possibly, studied in India. But that's debatable and questionable as well. I personally believe that he studied in India because there are many similarities in his theories of music. So present-day Middle Eastern music and Greek music is considered to be modal music. It is based on modes and scales. And we're going to be watching some YouTube videos with some of this music. So the most important instrument that is used throughout the Middle East today is an instrument that the Renaissance lute came out of that. So we have the Renaissance lute, which developed into the present-day guitar. But prior to the lute, which is, if you see a Renaissance lute, instead of having a flat back like a guitar does today, it had a rounded belly in the back. And again, here's a depiction of the oud. It is a fretless instrument. So you know that guitars have got frets. The sitar that I played for you has got frets. The violin does not have frets. So you're free to slide your hand up and down the fretboard of the instrument and create all these beautiful fine nuances of sound, approaching the note from above or below or vibrato. So you're not limited by the fret. So here's a picture of an oud. I will send you more pictures and more notes and more YouTube videos related to that. So this picture unfortunately is not showing the back of the instrument, which is a rounded belly, but take notice of at the top of the instrument, where the machine heads are, where the tuning pegs are, that thing is bent. It's not straight like on a guitar, it's bent. This instrument does have a large sound hole, which is often beautifully decorated, but the importance is that you must know that it does not have frets. Okay, there are a host of other instruments. The violin, again, like I said, it's used in India. The violin has been very well adopted in Middle Eastern music. Another instrument, specifically from Iran, is a bowed instrument called a kamanche. It's a long-necked instrument and they play it with a bow. So you will be watching a few videos showing some of these varieties of instruments. Another important instrument I've mentioned before when we spoke about Indian music was an instrument called the santur, which is the hammered dulcimer, which is found all over the world in different shapes and forms. Basically like a piano without keys. If you take away the keys, how would you play a piano? You'd open up the back of it and hit the strings with sticks. That's basically a huge box, some type of a zither with strings across it. So the santur, very important instrument, and all over the Middle East, another form of that instrument which is not hit with the sticks, but is plucked with finger picks, is the instrument called the qanun. Okay. Finally, coming to percussion instruments, not a very good picture. Instrument called the darbuka, the flower pot shaped drum. So please do not get confused. We covered the djembe in African music. We covered the djembe, which I have this one here. The difference is in the djembe, the traditional djembe, the skins are strapped on with strings. So these modern versions made by the company called Remo, they've got these other heads which are tightened on in a different way like a drum kit. That's more the way that the darbuka or dumbek is having the top tied on. So the big difference between the djembe and the darbuka is in size. Basically the shape is almost the same. It is played not sitting between your legs like we do with the djembe. The darbuka is held underneath your arm. So I'm going to demonstrate for you how the darbuka is played, but I do not have one with me. So I'm going to be playing the djembe, but please don't get mixed up. The dumbek or darbuka is a much smaller instrument. It's usually about this big, whereas the djembe is as big as the ones that you've seen here. Okay, so instead of sitting in a chair with the djembe between my legs, the darbuka is held under your arm like this. Of course, it's not that big. It's much smaller. So we come back to the basic ideas of hitting the drum in different places to create different sounds. There is also a language, and in your assignments, I want you to be able to mention this, especially if you're doing the breakdown of this video, which you're going to have to do as an assignment. You need to mention the language of drumming. The basic sounds are dum and tak. Dum and tak. Dum, tak. So the rhythms are made up of these different sounds. Like Indian music, the rhythms are not seen as something linear, but something cyclical. So you have cycles of sevens, cycles of eights, going up to 32 or even more. But basically thinking of rhythms as cyclic, also because the melody fits inside the rhythms, very similar to Indian music. Actually, North Indian classical music has got many influences from Persian music, present-day Iran, of course. So, rhythms. One of the rhythms is called Beladi. It's from Egypt. So it's dum, dum, tak, are the basic sounds. Dum, dum, tak. So I'm going to play for you two different rhythms. One is called Baladi. It's dum dum taka tak, dum taka tak. Dum dum taka tak, dum dum tak. Sorry. Dum dum taka tak, dum taka tak. 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 Okay, so that's one rhythm. Another one is a more simple rhythm called Ayub. Dumka dumka, dum. So basically that's the foundation of all the different rhythms. It can be very complicated. And again, I'll be sending you some links of somebody demonstrating these different rhythms. So much for the dumbek. Another important percussion instrument that is found all over the Middle East is the drums that I have behind me, frame drums, or the rik or the daf. As we know it in the West as the tambourine. The small one is the tambourine. And this one specifically, the small one that I have behind me, is actually I bought on a trip to Morocco. Beautifully decorated. It's called the rik. It has zills on it. Like the tambourine. This one's gone, the pitch has gone down a little bit because the skin has been sitting around. Okay, it's a rik with a daf. Now the largest frame drum, I'll be playing similar rhythms that I played on the dumbek, same sounds, but actually the frame drum you can get quite a lot of different sounds. Also play with it by pushing your thumb on the inside or squeezing it at the top and tightening this. Beautiful sounding instruments. It's lovely to be able to hold it and play it. You really hear the vibration and the sound of the instrument while you're playing. So much for the percussion instruments. Okay, let me just check my notes again, make sure I'm not missing anything out. Okay, so as far as Western harmony goes, there are forms of Middle Eastern music today which are using an orchestra. However, the concept of harmony is a little bit different. I wouldn't say it's as developed as Western classical music because the emphasis is on the modal system and sticking to a scale, very often sticking to a key. So something that is unique when you hear somebody singing in Middle Eastern music using an orchestra or a band, very often the whole orchestra would be following the melody of what the voice is doing. Or in between the verses, an instrument like the oud or a violin would be throwing in some melodic improvisation in between using the same scale. And of course, in the background, holding rhythmically the whole thing together would be used the doumbek or the darbuka or the frame drums. In the documentary that you're going to be watching, of which I will send you a link, it's called Sufi Soul. You will see a variety of different Middle Eastern instruments being played, and I do want you to be sending me back feedback on that. That'll be part of a very big assignment related to the Sufis. But in the documentary, you'll have lots of opportunity to see a variety of different forms and styles of Middle Eastern music. A very important style of music that is actually from North India and Pakistan is a style called Qawwali, which is very ecstatic love poetry. You could say somehow maybe related thing I can think of similar to that would be gospel music in Baptist churches where people sing in a particular way, devotional music. Qawwali is a form of devotional Islamic music. Of course, the Taliban and ISIS and these people decry this form of music and say it's a total no-no. But anyway, people have to express what's in their hearts and express their love for God in their hearts, and they do it through music. So that is Qawwali, and that will come up in the documentary on the Sufis. Okay, similar to in Indian music, when I played my raga, my piece of music on the sitar, I often started without a set melody, and it was just sort of free flow. In the same way, very often classical Middle Eastern music may start off in the same way, just for a few minutes. They may have a piece where they just introduce the mode and move around the melody in a really free, open way, and this is sort of a non-metric, non-rhythmic section before the singer starts, and you'll hear this in a lot of pieces. You'll have a little bit of oud playing, a few notes or opening up, and then the singer or somebody will come in and play the melody, and everybody will join in, possibly with an orchestra. This is called, in India we call it the alap. In Middle Eastern music we call this is the avaz, the opening. And then also free improvisation is also called taksim. There are different names for the different scales used. I do not expect you to, of course, especially that we're not getting tested, we're just doing assignments. There are different names for some of these different scales and modes, very similar to how we would call the ragas in Indian music. We have particular names for these different pieces that are used, different scales that are used. So, coming back to the importance of this documentary that is the central focus of this whole section on Middle Eastern music, the Sufis. You may have heard of a group of people that do ecstatic dance, and these people are called the dervishes, the whirling dervishes, and they're from Turkey, and they're mentioned quite often in the documentary that you're going to be watching. This is a very important part of this section because the leader of that organization or that group is the whirling dervishes was a person by the name of Rumi. Now, as far as poetry around the world, Rumi is actually one of the widest read poets today. I think back in the 80s and 90s, translations of his work became, everybody was reading Rumi. It still is a very popular form of poetry, and a lot of this poetry is devotional poetry. It brings up biblical images, of course, because in Islam they also relate to the Old Testament. So some of the poetry brings in themes and ideas from both traditions, Islam and Christianity, because Rumi lived in Turkey, which there was a huge Greek community, a Greek Orthodox community. So he was very familiar with Christianity as well. So the interesting thing about Rumi was when he started his whirling dancing and using music, he was very criticized by the hardliners, and his comment was, where people said, you're supposed to be praying now, you're not supposed to be dancing and singing. He said, we pray through our dancing and singing. Many people argue and debate whether he actually said this or not, because he was a pretty traditional Muslim as well and did keep up his regular daily practices of prayer and that. Sufism is a form of universalism, very similar to the Unitarian Universalist congregation within Christianity. They're not stuck on forms, they're not stuck on rigidity, they're open to thinking about things in a different way, they're open to exploring things in a different way, and this is very much an important aspect of Sufism. Something that's very important for you to know is that as Islam spread throughout the world, it didn't just destroy everything it came across, it actually imbibed and embraced so many things. So architecture, calligraphy, engineering, the word Arabic, the word arithmetic is actually an Arabic word. They took the math and the sciences from places like India, the philosophies of Greece, the knowledge already that many civilizations had about architecture and engineering, and embraced all of these and created a thriving new civilization as they brought all these ideas together. One of the important places where this thriving really took place, you may be very surprised to know that actually present-day Spain was under Islamic rule for 400 years. And you are going to be watching a short documentary about a place called the Alhambra. The Alhambra is in South Spain. So when we finish this section on the Middle East, we're actually moving to Spain and talking about gypsies and flamenco music. So it's joining all these ideas together, because flamenco music was influenced by both Arabic elements, gypsy elements, and North African elements. So I find it a very nice way to finish off the semester, as we finish off with Spain and flamenco music. The very last section we're going to do is going to be something completely different. We're going to touch a little bit on reggae music, Bob Marley, Rastafari culture, and then finally the last two classes we're going to be talking about the Woodstock era and the influence of rock and roll music and the multicultural aspect of the Woodstock generation and what was going on in the country. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. I will be sending you the notes for Middle East. I've basically covered everything already in this talk. You don't even really need the notes, but I'll send you the notes anyway as a reference for your assignments that you're going to be doing. So I'll be sending out through email what your assignments are, and I hope you enjoyed this video that I just made. I hope you found it informative. I will require you, like you have done with the Africa section, to send me a rundown of everything that I've covered in this lecture, so that I know that you've watched it, and I hope you're all well. I think a lot of younger generation people your age are not taking this thing that seriously. I don't know if that's still the case, but I know a lot of young people are still feeling the freedom to run around and go everywhere they want because they feel this is not going to hit them. Please be very cautious. Don't take advantage of your freedoms. Please stay at home as much as you can. Stay healthy. Eat well. Exercise. Get some fresh air. Go for walks. And stay safe. Much love to you all. And I'll be in touch through email and sending you the assignments for this section. Thank you very much.